All right. Thank you very much. Happy Thursday. It's been a while since I've been on the Indoor Ag Cafe. But we're really excited today to talk about something that has been growing for about a year between us, and we think fills a need that we have in our broader industry. Um, Today, myself, John Ertle, Melanie Yelton, Sam Chronert, and Noah Langenfeld are going to sort of walk through what we think a United Greenhouse Growers Association would look like and how that could better represent and combine the many interests of the growers across North America. Um, so, um,
Yeah,
for everyone's just structural stuff, like we're just going to go through a real brief sort of presentation about the background of what we think is how the structure of this should work. And then we're going to kind of open it up. We want to be a little bit more interactive. This is sort of a special edition of the webinar, and we definitely want folks to hop in and have a voice in this sort of discussion. Because there's a lot of work that'll go into this, and we really want to make sure that we have our direction right. Um, so, without further ado, Sam, I'll let you take the first few slides here.
yeah, perfect. I mean, John, you said it took the words out of my mouth there. Super excited for everybody to be here today and to chat through this. Like you mentioned, very much discussion. Um, so just quick agenda to start off, where we'll spend the next hour, just give a little bit of context, why UGGA exists. Melanie had given an Indoor Ag Science Cafe chat a couple months ago. So hopefully y'all saw that, but if not, then, just a little background and then just jumping into the discussion and some of the next steps. I think that if there's one takeaway besides, wanting to be involved with the UGGA and think it's a good idea, is that we're starting up 4 committees, really just kind of focusing the effort, really trying to make this thing happen, focusing on membership, our resources, forums, and stories. And a lot of what we'll be talking about is your feedback to shape them, if they're the right categories, where we go from here. And we love any interest in helping to lead one. Very much want this to be a team effort. And I guess a little bit of background on why we started UGGA. I mean, from my background was a bit non-traditional and was super interested in indoor farming, very, very passionate about it, and ended up as a grower and was fairly young and just didn't really know what else was going on in the industry. Was kind of put in like a very fast-paced situation, managing a farm, right? And obviously, as happens in farms, things were going wrong. There's different problems to solve. And at the time, it felt very isolating, right? I didn't know what resources were available. I didn't know what other growers were out there, who I could talk to, really. And I just remember like some of my favorite days were when we did have growers from other farms come on site. And it was just like kind of mind blowing. I was like, oh, we're all dealing with the exact same things. And you might have a different approach than I do, but we're getting at the same root cause. And so really just want to build that community and facilitate more of those kind of interactions between growers, and support them, but then also with the larger industry, with academia, with like help forge some relationships with extension, with the industry at large. So in my mind, that's kind of my origin story of why we're starting it from my perspective there.
Yeah, and I think Sam's sentiments are echoed by a lot of folks that we've talked to. A lot of growers that want to adopt CEA practices or want to use different sort of greenhouse technologies or sort of the physics that we can leverage with controlled environment in general. Often don't really have a good place to start, and it is partially like we, as from the academic side, we've had part of our responsibility is sort of communicate this information, but there's really no centralized location for people to sort of access things. Um, Now there are different groups that have sort of similar mission statements in terms of either they're lobbying on behalf of the greenhouse sort of industry in the U.S. or they're working on, workforce education or something of that nature, which is excellent. And we don't want to displace or replace any of these groups, but we do want to sort of fill the sort of the grower to grower gap that is existed, just like Sam sort of describing. And so that's sort of the focus. We have a lot of connections on the academic side, and we have lots of connections on the grower side, and we really want to try and put these together into something that's more formidable than it has been in the past. So part of our long-term vision, and I am lifting this directly from Melanie's discussion back in January, presenting the sort of long-term vision of the UGGA, and part of her discussion from last year at ASHS, if you guys were able to go to that discussion. But we see this in sort of like a three-part sort of long-term vision. So the first is to sort of establish a grower network that's at a bit of a higher scale. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the next slide, but we sort of want this thing to be open to anyone. Everybody kind of can sort of become a stakeholder in this mission. We want to encourage the peer-to-peer learning aspects, and we'll talk about that a little bit more too. But we've started sort of curating resource libraries, content that either we've vetted or we've had expertise weigh in on whether or not these tools are useful. And then we also want to sort of connect growers together. And this can also be part of a workforce recruitment tool for folks. And so there's some sort of big aspirations on the side of, let's grow the our ability to actually locate folks that have the expertise needed for these various positions. Another aspect of this is we want to sort of develop a more direct research pipeline that actually supports the growers that we serve as stakeholders. One possibility is sort of building the idea that we can standardize research sites. We have the opportunity to sort of build more community-facing greenhouses that support this, and we want to definitely firm up the discussion between growers and researchers directly, so that we can actually vet these priorities accurately. And then, of course, there's the sort of sorry, Sam, thank you. There's sort of like the collective action that we want to put together. So this is definitely part of our long-term vision, but our greenhouse network is very disjointed. Other countries with much smaller networks get access to group buying power. They can leverage large amounts of their clientele to sort of get better deals on things. Shared marketing as a tool for all greenhouse grown products. Obviously, we've seen, fresh market tomatoes have gone from 5 to 85% of our fresh market available tomatoes in the grocery store from like 2005 to I think 2020. And so, that was really just through the effort of we see the improved quality, but we don't really advertise it as effectively. And we think that instead of farms independently having their own marketing structure, we can kind of leverage the sort of whole industry into covering some of that cost. And then also some unified advocacy, right? So different policy different policy discussions are happening that support different levels of growers, but we really want to combine those with our research priorities. I'll go to the next one for me, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the models that we want to look at is the one done by Dr. Junmu Ying and Trevor Terry from the University of Kentucky and the Kentucky Hort Council. So just to give an idea of what some dedicated research can do, this is a map of the state of Kentucky with every greenhouse operation mapped. Now, before this, we really didn't have a clear picture of what the Kentucky market looked like, and it appears very small from just our general understanding. And I lived in Ohio for the majority of my life. I thought that the greenhouse industry in Kentucky was really, really small. But when you start to factor in the number of folks that utilize this kind of technology or this kind of controlled environment approach, these are the stakeholders that we are trying to serve in that broader greenhouse community. So, this is a model that we can sort of build off of and, sort of figure out how we can apply at a larger scale. But If this is just the size of the Kentucky market, then this is really, really, really promising and exciting to imagine what we can do if we sort of start to unite the growers from across the entire U.S. Um, Move on, Sam?
Mhm.
All right.
Yeah, I'll chime in here. So this is kind of the portion where if you think about this as like a proposal, this is our preliminary data. We have already started. We have a website up and running, thanks in large part to Sam. And it is free, completely free, completely open. You're welcome to go on there right now, greenhousegrowers.org. There's a place where you can sign up for an account. And we have a couple of kind of main core features that are going to kind of guide our discussion throughout the rest of this presentation. I think we want to maybe demo the website a little bit, Sam. Is that correct?
I'll move over to that tab.
Perfect.
All right. Yeah, just a quick little view here. We can keep going later on as we kind of dive into the details, but just kind of on the public facing side, one of the big things that we have right here is just resources. It's fairly basic at this point. We have different ideas around making it easier to organize and search things and favorite things and all of that. But we definitely put some time into looking at a lot of different categories here. So it's kind of a centralized place where people can come and access different things. Bit of a community page here, some photos from across different farms and systems and such. And then you can log in here and a little bit of a member dashboard with a forum, just preliminary version of it, and a lot of kind of what we're going to be talking about and hopefully discussing today amongst us are going to be things that we directly take to build this thing out and actually make it, a space that people can come to and have their needs met. I'm going to move over
Awesome.
to
Yeah. Thanks for that demo, Sam. So yeah, essentially what we're going to be using is that current kind of build out of that website as a roadmap. So like I mentioned, we kind of have four main thrusts that we want to kind of look at in this group. One of them is that resources page that Sam just demoed there. So keeping that up to date, adding things to it, making sure that's optimized for growers of all sizes. That photo gallery, some stories. We're still working on that a little bit. Melanie, I think we'll touch base on that a little bit more. And then also the forum, which Sam is starting to get up. So if you want to go to the next slide, I think that's kind of our jump in point. Yeah, so kind of our idea for this group is we want to kind of currently break it into four sections, and we're going to spend a little bit of time, each one of us, talking about each of these four sections, with the idea being that there would be some kind of committee-esque group that meets on a regular basis and discusses their respective section. So whether that's membership, resources, forum, or stories get together and collaborate and see what's needed from the stakeholders that you're hearing from other colleagues, and how you can help be a part of that. We're hoping to meet as a full group quarterly. So essentially all the committees together, all of us at UGGA kind of have a quarterly meetup and discuss how things are going, how we can improve, and go from there. So yeah, all four of us are involved. So myself, John, Sam, and Melanie. So feel free to reach out to any one of us at any time during this presentation here or any time after. I think we're going to move now into discussing kind of each one of these core thrusts. So I think the first one we'll look at is membership. I think John's going to talk about that.
Yeah. So, guys, real quick overview. Membership to the UGGA is free, right? We can all join today. We can all send this to someone we know and have them jump in. Now, obviously, there's 41 people on this call, right? And uh, maybe if anybody wants to throw in the chat or chime in here, I'm kind of curious where everybody comes from. I know there's a few academics on here. I know there's probably a few growers. Um, so maybe here I'll throw nice. I'll throw two notes in the chat, academics and growers, and feel free to just throw a like if you fall into either of those groups. Um, so what we kind of want to ask, as we've sort of presented sort of the beginning of the UGGA's mission and the sort of direction we want to go in, we kind of want to know who we think would be missing from this call. Who is we're trying to serve a broad range of stakeholders, but who's not here that we need to sort of start talking to and get people interested in sort of the future of this. Nice, very cool. Chat folks hopping in.
Yeah, it looks like we got folks from all over the country. We got some research. We got some industry. Service provider, Tom, thank you.
So one thing that's jumping out to me right away is, I threw in an academics and a growers chat. We have 7 academics. I know there's more on the call, and 1 grower. So, kind of the point, we want to start accessing the grower networks more directly. And I guess that's sort of like our challenge in that charge is, and if anybody wants to hop in, how do we actually start to get to the grower level and start to chat with people? What sorts of things might we want to do to sort of increase that attention?
Yeah, I want to encourage people to speak up. You can take your off mute and just jump in there directly.
Good call about the tough to get a Northeast grower on a call midday at the end of May. Very fair. Yeah,
Very good.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's kind of interesting, there's sort of groups of people that are used to going to seminars and webinars like we are right now. And then there's the smaller growers, which, they're working, and they, for them to even take the time or have the time really to jump on something like this is difficult. So, but often I think those are, since I've gone into consulting the last 3 or 4 years, that's where I get the most questions, is these smaller growers that need help and almost don't know where to go. And again, they're not in the academic stream necessarily, and they're, sort of randomly Googling and frequently sort of come across my name and call me up and say, "Can you help?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I can help." But we wanted to create this place. I think, Sam and I, when we were talking about it, was like a cross between a bowling club, a church, just what kind of thing would create more of a sense of community, where people could go and get the information they need to make decisions. So.
Oh, and this is interesting with the the AERGC. That's a good call out. You can definitely reach out to them.
Yeah, and AERGC, that's interesting too, because Cherry, you might be able to speak to this. I know it used to be NCRA 101 would have a combined meeting periodically together with AERGC, and I don't know if we still do that, but that was a good call, and to bring these 2 groups together, because they were pretty isolated from each other sometimes.
That's true.
Yeah.
Like to add in a couple of thoughts.
Hop in, Andrew.
With some of the terminology it creates a lot of confusion, I think. And even in the first few slides that you showed, we saw for high tunnels already, a passive tunnel, a hoop house, a high tunnel. And I think that there needs to be some clarification around terminology, even within our own CEA group here at Georgia. We struggle a little bit on defining, what CEA is. And the name greenhouse, with the NRCS high tunnel program, they've been hammering the public for years on saying a high tunnel is not a greenhouse.
Mm.
And sometimes I think here within Georgia, we have a lot of growers who, maybe they don't grow exclusively in protected structures, but maybe use, and a lot of vegetable farms use a greenhouse for their transplants. But if you were to say to them, hey, how do you like being part of CEA? They would say, well, we don't know what that is, or we think CEA is just indoor vertical farms. And so I guess I'm wondering a little bit whether, just from the look of the name, whether somebody that grows in the soil in a high tunnel is going to say, okay, this is a group for me. It sounds like it is. And then I also wonder, protected ag does include your fully indoor operations. And I didn't know if this group is planning to, include the indoor vertical farms in the mix here, or if that's something separate. Just seems to be there's a lot of different terms floating around currently, and I think there's a fair amount of confusion around some of them.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Andrew. And yeah, it is kind of a nightmare. I find most farmers don't think in terms of the term CEA. I've confused a lot of people on that one. And yeah, it's almost like protected. I think of it as protected plants. I make the joke, if you throw a blanket over an azalea plant, you're a greenhouse grower. But it's really protected culture is the inclusive way I would like to think of this community. So that's something we could. I don't know if we could change the name at this point, but we could certainly change it as the immediate mission statement right up front. You know, to define that. And again, I think what you're saying too is like there's often not these hard and fast definitions. A high tunnel person may, or a tunnel person might grow in the ground one year and might put in tables another year. It fluctuates within a grower and what they're doing. And um, again, I want them to have a place where they can come and find a forum. Hopefully as we get more sophisticated with the search capability, you can find that person who's doing what you're doing. They can find you at Georgia easily, because what we're seeing is many states don't have faculty in CEA or in extension that can support what they're doing. And so, again, it's consultant work that I do. It's all over the country. And so finding that right person is hard. And that's what I'd like for people to do is come here, they can see the resources and go, oh, okay, this is the one that I need. And also find, a grower in another state, another place that would help them, and a professor in another place that would help them.
Great. Yeah.
I guess like, at kind of at the heart of that too is, communicating with folks in a way that lets them feel like they're associated and part of a community, and like have like the identity of like, oh, I am a greenhouse grower, I'm protected grower, right? It's like if we're talking about like the recruitment side of things, if somebody doesn't identify as a greenhouse grower, they're looking up United Greenhouse Growers. It doesn't feel like it's something that applies to them. And so I guess it's like, how do you communicate out within the industry? Like, hey, regardless of what we call it, like we're all doing some similar things and we can work together and learn from each other. I guess, yeah, that's like an interesting open, like, how do you change some of that, who I identify with as a grower, right?
The science kind of crossed the boundary too. When I envisioned this, I thought about it from like the, sort of like a cold frame and up sort of technology level, which is, essentially trying to include everybody. But sorry, did I cut you off, Andrew?
Oh, I was just going to ask whether people doing the, fully indoor systems, with sole source lighting, would that fall under this group?
I mean, I would say yes, but I think that I'm trying to say this without prejudice, but I think that sometimes the larger, well financed facilities, which by definition, indoor growers tend to have money behind them because it takes so much money to even start a facility like that. They often, I don't want to say they don't need a community like this, but they don't seek it out. But yeah, I would like to see. I mean, Sam's at plenty, so yeah, I guess yeah, we include we include Sam. So um, there's a comment in the thing from Jonathan Ebba at UNH Extension about clarification also on crops. This is a really good point that Jonathan's making because, again, we would like to include ornamental production. It's certainly a big swath of greenhouse production. But my experience has been primarily with vegetables, although many of the people I work with as a consultant are ornamentals. So again, I don't want to be exclusionary at this point in any way. Um,
And I guess like as kind of part of this is like how people can feel like they're included. I mean, part of that, do we feel like that would be something with direct outreach? And I mean, John, I really liked what you're saying, where it's like science kind of bridges a lot of it, right? And I guess I'd be curious if there's anybody from academia extension. It's like, how do y'all interact with growers? And just curious if anybody has any background on that.
I've talked to a couple of folks, and it's been challenging, right? There's and I'm not sure if he's here, but there's a new extension professor in Maine, and he's kind of growing it from the ground up. There really wasn't any connection between any of these folks, and so his job as extension has been kind of like to do some outreach and sort of bring people together. But and he's been doing that successfully for about a year, but it's still challenging because a lot of those growers don't really know that there are resources out there. There are other folks doing this sort of thing that the hoop house that they've purchased to for like propagation purposes for just their one farm is as a small grower is like not like there is inclusion in this broader group. So there's been some challenge there, and then also from the academic side, like when there isn't an extension agent that serves that community, I've heard from folks that like they get so many requests that they can't answer them. And so it becomes a problem where they're just that those resources are effectively walled off by nothing more than just, lack of human power, or time, which is certainly not the way we want this industry to be supported. Guys, looking at time, should we move into resources here?
Yeah, I can hop over there.
Sounds good. Yeah. Thanks, John and Sam. I can talk a little bit about this. So our resource list is kind of like the biggest thing currently on the website, at least the most expansive thing. And this kind of, I guess, was developed kind of from our collective experiences and our collective knowledge of resources that we, whether personally biased or not, thought were good for our own work and our own knowledge. But we're curious always on what resources you think might be valuable to producers, growers, and stakeholders out there. So we demoed it a little bit, just a few seconds, but I encourage you again to go to that website and look at that tab. They're organized in about 10, 12 different categories. And there's a lot on there. Right now, it's just kind of a really big, long list. Essentially, it's just a link tree, right? We've got links to all these different resources, and then we've got a little description of each one of them, what they're useful for, how you might be able to use them in your own production or your own system. So one of the key questions that I think we wanted to ask is basically what's missing? Is there something obvious? Maybe if you're able to hop on that site quick and just kind of skim through that, maybe just category wise, is there something that you're seeing that you either hope would be included or want to be included, or you've maybe heard from your stakeholders or people that you work with should be included? We're open to adding anything that's wanting to help make this relevant and keep this up to date. That's kind of one of the big things we want to do with this group, is to essentially build a curated list and keep that list up to date. As we know, in a lot of industries like CEA, things come and go sometimes. So we want to be able to keep the lists and those groups and things up to date. So I see a couple of things in the chat there. Sam put the link in there. So that hyperlink, you can just click on that, and that'll take you directly to that resource page. So I encourage you to look at that. Yeah, if there's anything missing, drop that in the chat. We'll take note of those. But feel free to speak up as well if there's anything that you want to see included, or if there's something that you think might be like super important, like should we be highlighting something? We just kind of have a general list in no real particular order. Is there something that should be like out front, like the most important thing? Anything like that? So feel free to speak up or put some stuff in the comments there. Maybe Sam, can you speak to how maybe you originally like organized the list or kind of came up with those categories?
I can share it on there.
Perfect.
I think a lot of it is just kind of from trying to learn myself as a grower, right? Going through what courses are out there, what these helpful tools are for the actual kind of day to day. Hydro Buddy is always a good one for mixing AB mixes. Then you just get into different certifications, what kind of research and extension resources are out there, and where is actually the research happening. There's a lot of folks on this call that are doing some pretty cool stuff, and want to make that available to folks. What organizations and trade groups are in the space, what conferences and trade shows are out there, and then kind of getting into the nitty gritty, like where actually can I buy seeds from, some of these different biological and crop inputs, and then lab testing, where can I actually get some nutrient samples if I need them? If you're trying to start up a greenhouse or build onto it or supply it, where can I do all those things? Who can I talk to for consulting and advisory? There's the grants and funding side, publications and media, and then just some other useful links down here, coalitions, job searching, some more education courses here. So yeah, there's definitely a lot here, just kind of racking my brain trying to just get everything on there. But this definitely isn't comprehensive, and there could be other ways to provide resources. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Sam, you're making a good point. I mean, this is not done. This is a long way from being done. It's, like we said, or Noah pointed out in the beginning, it's been about a year, almost a year. It'll be a year in August, that, we've kind of had this concept rolling around. And, I've wondered, even the resource pages, can it become more like Wikipedia, where people like you guys can go in and edit it? Because certainly as we, people from the ornamental side, people from, all the questions that have already come up, engineering side, maybe about resources that I'm not aware of, that Sam's not aware of. So we need those to be added, and then there needs to be corrections. So we've got to pretty quickly figure out a way that things can be added and corrected. And again, that's Wikipedia comes to mind. I've done a few edits on that. It's easy to do, but we've got to figure that out pretty soon. So, but
Yeah,
it's
and one of the
always
things
going to be dynamic right now. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just saying, one of the things I want to highlight is this doesn't necessarily all have to be for someone that's just growing plants, right? There's a wide variety of resources. One of the things that kind of jumps onto me is different university programs. For example, when I was trying to look at different programs and I was focused on CEA, the program I ended up in, I ended up finding through the long grapevine. There was no Google search that led me to that program. So lists like this are going to be really helpful to people that are just getting started in CEA, whether that's wanting to go into industry or into academia. So I think there's benefits there for kind of all stakeholders all across the spectrum, which is one of the big things we're really trying to push with this group.
Also, guys, we did just try and come up with a resources page on our own. If if we didn't include your organization or something, we're so sorry. We we just want to fix it and make sure that we grow these list of resources.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons we're having this chat. Basically, like, what's missing, right? Is there a good resource? Everyone on here is a great resource, so we'd love to include some other organizations and some links to things that help kind of grow and expand and provide a variety of things for the users of this group.
Then, I mean, I guess also just be like the list is something, we need to be able to provide to growers so they can access, but also if anybody has any thoughts, how could we provide resources to growers that extend beyond just, the list of links? Are there different outreach ways to get the resources in their hands? Basically, what I'm asking is this the best format to provide the resources, along with what resources should be added?
All right. What's our next topic? Just looking at the time here.
All right. So yeah, anything else on resources, we can come back to it, throw it in the chat, or you can send it to us on the site. But the next topic here is just around forums. And so in talking with a bunch of different growers, one of the things that was called out is would love to have places, whether in person or virtual, where growers can actually meet with each other, network with each other, learn from each other. At the kind of core of what we're trying to do is bring people together and create a community around this thing that we all do, that we're all involved in, that, is important. And in terms of the forums, it's kind of like, how do we create a space where they can actually talk? Right now, my head is kind of similar to Reddit in a way, potentially. And I'm just curious if anybody has any thoughts around, would you actually use an online forum for facilitating these conversations? Or is there a better way? Should we be focusing on having the forums be in this format, right, where you kind of have the webinar discussion? Or is it in person at conferences? Just generally curious if anybody has any takes just on kind of like formatting an appropriate way to kind of have a forum to facilitate that community.
I can share something. So I'm an extension specialist at University of Georgia working on plant pathology in controlled environment agriculture. So honestly, based on my experiences working with growers, it works best when you talk to them in person. So there are a lot of surveys and going on already. People are trying to capture a lot of information through surveys, and we haven't had that much luck with surveys. But then when we actually talk to the growers, they are willing to share, they're willing to collaborate. So I would say webinars could be another option because they are also looking for resources, and they cannot travel all the time to be there in person for events like this. So my take would be to kind of go to the old route of extension agents and reaching out to the growers, but also a new route of Zoom and webinars where they can get what they need, and we can reach out to them and they can talk.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. And I guess when you're saying like talking with them directly. Yeah, love that. What kind of advice would you have potentially on just like finding everybody, right? I mean, Chinlu did an amazing thing in Kentucky where she mapped everybody, but how, in your experience, have you kind of forged those relationships and kind of gotten to the point where you can go visit, can reach out directly?
Honestly, when I started this position 2 years ago, I'm kind of in the same boat if being a new specialist and still figuring my way out. So I started reaching out to the extension agents and reaching out to kind of know if there are farms available, facilities available. And to date, I come across new facilities that I haven't been before, and like, slowly and slowly as the agents are talking, because they have an old connection with these growers and they have the trust already built in because of their interaction, so that really helps. And then once you are there, it's like yeah, I'm trying to think of a saying that once you're there, it's easier and it opens the door, right? So it's hard to stick in the foot kind of thing. So what I have seen is once I have gone to a facility, this is not definitely not for all facilities, but I would say major facilities that I have visited. Once I have visited them and I have talked to them, I've shown them the kind of work I do, and I've helped them with, disease diagnosis and issues, send them reports, send them some management recommendations. And this could be another way to actually send resources to growers, to have like a centralized resource platform where researchers or extension specialists like us who have both research and extension appointments can, look into those resources and share them with our grower clientele group. And then, and pass that information on, because definitely I feel there is lack of resources for sure when the growers are looking into specifics on like, okay, what product I want to apply, what do I do with this IPM? And the complexity comes in because each system, even though the basics are same, every grower does it differently. So, so I would
That,
say,
yeah,
yeah, I would say putting it up at a central level, I think this is a good start. And having connections with extension agents, specialists, and then taking them to our final clientele and involving growers. And once they realize and become confident, and like start trusting you, they'll start reaching out to you. They'll start reaching out and not only attending meetings and then collaborating and give you ideas on what needs to be done next as well. Mm-hmm.
that makes a lot of sense. I feel like it's we've kind of broken what we're talking, like the work streams and how we're going about this, into different categories, but ultimately like it all comes together, right? It's like you got to we were talking about like recruitment, and it's like, okay, well, what that actually probably looks like is working with the extension agents and making those introductions, and then working with this group that is more academic and industry focused to provide them the resources proactively. And then you can start having that trust that we're creating the space, bringing people in, making the introductions between them, and creating that kind of forum. And yeah, that's super helpful. Appreciate that.
I'd like to just make a pitch for being careful with terminology.
Absolutely.
Very, very important. Agents are, often thought of as county-based, and whereas other state extension systems don't use the word agent, they use a different term. Of course, you're also talking about a very wide range of responsibilities in some states, or narrow responsibilities in other ones. In some states, they're bachelor's level. In other states, they're PhD level. In some states, they do research. In some states, they don't. So I'd say arguably, at least in my experience, a constant across all of that is that the academic unit state specialists. I am one here at OSU, are possibly the best linkage to the state industry writ large. Presumably they know and work very closely with the county-based people or the regional-based folks, because a number of states are going to regional centers, not county-based offices anymore. So you have a lot of flux occurring. So if the goal is to reach growers via a university system, specifically one focused on extension, you may want to start with the state specialists in the academic units like plant pathology, entomology, and horticulture, plant sciences, and so on, who are regularly doing that applied research and arguably probably very much in touch with their community of growers. So that's one thing. I just like when I heard agent, hear agent, which is fine. It's just, it doesn't not apply in many states.
Yeah.
So that's just one thing. And then specific to the quote unquote low end of CEA, the high tunnel hoop house, that's a very robust network of state specialists. They have their own group that's been formed through the USDA. They typically are in regular contact with, high tunnel users, routinely doing on-farm research with them and holding programs at some scale. But I'm not sure if that particular community is well represented or within UGGA at the moment, or would be in the future. So greenhouse to some people means like active climate control, and to others it may include a passively controlled system. And I was just communicating briefly with John about this, and I mentioned that Rabobank, many people know who Rabobank is. They do an annual global CEA survey, and they do go to the trouble of describing the different categories of greenhouse that they are surveying. And you're probably familiar with those surveys, but just in case not, they do include the high tunnel type system at the quote low end greenhouse. So they're lumping it in, whereas others will make a definitive separation between the passive and the active control. And of course, there are hybrids, some high tunnel like structures with fans, so there's always that in between, people cutting over the margins, but there are those broad groups. So yeah, I just thought calibration of terminology would occasionally be helpful. And of course, many greenhouses in Mexico are actually high tunnels in their actual construction. So yeah.
That's super helpful. I appreciate that. I mean, this is exactly, why we're having this discussion, right? Because from my background, not coming from the academic side, like just getting that kind of background on extension and all of that is super helpful. Very much appreciate it.
I have a question, Matt. Yeah, that's really helpful comment. Matt, when you work, do you feel comfortable working? That sounds crazy. Like outside of Kentucky, like when farmers call you from, Wyoming or Missouri, is there a box around Ohio, or how does that feel to you for the agents and things like that?
It's a great question. My experience has been if somebody calls me from outside of Ohio, of course I try to address the question head on because there may be time constraints or what have you. But at the same time, it's a golden opportunity for me to refer them to my counterpart there, right? Mm-hmm. So if somebody calls me from Kentucky, like, hey, I got this, high tunnel or what, blah, 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 and I want to set up an irrigation system. I'm like, have you spoken with so-and-so? Mm-hmm. Because we know each other, right? And we want to foster those local connections at the same time. If or oh yeah, they asked me to call you, or whatever the case might be. So
Right.
there's a combination of, serve the moment, but also make sure that there's an opportunity for them to connect or reconnect with their local land grant, whatever form of land grant that is. So yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah, I mean, again, my 20-year vision for this is for it to be almost like if you look at the FFA site, Future Farmers of America site, like there's kind of there's like the state, you know, organizations and county organizations, but then it ties to a national organization. So, people can find each other readily. And if there's people local to you, fantastic. If there's not, you can also find the people that aren't local to you. If you're growing, I don't know, wasabi or something unusual, you can find that rare person that's doing what you're doing and find them. So, okay, cool. Thank you.
Great. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to pop on over to the last area here.
Okay.
And
go ahead, John.
Oh, sorry.
About this. I guess so with the stories here, what we're thinking is just also having some kind of place where we can share different people's stories and what kind of challenges they've dealt with in their farms, what kind of brought them to it, and just kind of foster some of that shared connection that we have been talking about, and that kind of shared background even across different things. I mean, Jose, to your point, where it's any resources that can help me run the business out of my farm, I guess in terms of the stories, it's if somebody brings their story of like, okay, well, I was trying to start up a farm and I was having a hard time trying to figure out what type of, build I needed, what just like pulling together all of the different sides. So I guess just generally kind of curious about there, if anybody has any thoughts on if this is something that they would find appealing, that could help kind of build that community, what these would look like for us to focus on gathering, whether it's just like business, would it be more like case studies or just personal stories? And then again, format, like, is this a written thing? Is this a video? Just curious on some thoughts there.
Yeah, I just want to jump in, Sam, and say, for me, I feel like the stories are very, very important. I think it's already come up with, the points that Yoshika mentioned earlier, getting in your truck or car and going to see that grower. I know when we were talking with Jen Lowe about Kentucky, she made that point also. She said, so many growers, by their nature, kind of quiet, they're not sitting around on their computers a lot. You have to get in your car and go see them and talk to them one-on-one. It is a very relationship driven, we're people. So having those stories is important. Seeing the photographs of a farm that kind of looks like yours maybe, or looks like where you want yours to go. So I think these stories where you start to identify as this is my group or these are my people are really, really important. And so I'm hoping that we can drive this and have more of that human interest, which is it's going to bounce back and forth between the science and the facts and the things that you need to go where you want to go. But it's seeing where you want to go in a tangible way, perhaps through the stories, is a first step. And it brings in what you were saying, Noah, too. I think about, as students think about where they want to go, having a place where they can go and kind of get a picture of what this industry looks like is helpful, because you just don't know. You're 19, 20, you're roaming around your college trying to figure out what to do. And hopefully these stories will fill in the gaps there.
If I can add to that, if you guys can hear me, is one of the big takeaways I had from Indoor AgCon this year was that we as an industry don't do a good enough job at telling our stories, that we are letting the New York Times, the Washington Post, all these like big media outlets drive our story, right? Like they're driving the conversation, and those conversations, because they're trying to get headlines, are usually bad news, right? Are failure stories, not success stories. And so I really like that this is part of UGGA's mission, is to tell these stories so that we can take the wheel, that we're driving the conversation with, the success stories, with, the human interest stories, how we're impacting our community, not just through claims of jobs and all these things that may or may not have materialized through all these companies, but actually the personal and community positive impacts that the industry is making, and that you can be successful doing this from low tech, whatever you want to call that, to high tech, however you define that as well. So I'm really glad that this is part of the mission, and we need to get these stories out more.
Yeah. Thank you, Nadia. Yeah, one of the most impactful stories for me that I had a chance to hear was Chris Curry, who people probably heard speak a couple of weeks ago here at the Ag Cafe. He took us to visit an onion grower that had added a relatively small, maybe half-acre greenhouse where they grow lettuces and basil in Iowa, and it was just very, I don't know, interesting to think about this, 900 acres of onion growing, but, an acre of lettuce and basil growing. And again, it's that story in a state that you normally wouldn't think of being very strong in CEA. And so those are the kind of stories that are very impactful, I think, to me and others. So, but I like what you just said, Nadia, about, we let other people tell our story, and people don't know how fantastic and important CEA is to our economy and to our communities.
We're approaching time here.
Yep.
So I guess just to kind of wrap things up here, I don't know if we have that much time to go into, are these the right four? What category did we skip? Because we're certainly open to all of the feedback on different ideas here. But yeah, really kind of the next steps here are to keep chatting. As we mentioned earlier here, I'm going to pop back over here. We're putting together these different committees to kind of drive each of these areas. And we would love any additional feedback, very much appreciate the feedback that y'all have given so far. And would love for you to come join. And each committee we're planning on once or twice a month, with the quarterly full UGGA gathering. And yeah, we're hoping to make this happen.
So yeah, guys, just to be very clear, our ask essentially, as we kind of move through this, we want to sort of build out these different parts of our site. We want to then also decide which new areas really need our support. If people can try and participate with us in these meetings that we're going to have once or twice a month, you'll see this posted on the site. You'll see this posted by us in other places that you frequently get communication from these groups. And we would like to try and sort of plan more, sort of milestone level gatherings and goals as we sort of, grow this organization. We are a nonprofit, so this is really just being done out of an unpaid fashion for all of us. And so whatever support you can give us is really, really helpful as we continue to sort of state and determine what things we will do into the future.
So really appreciate your time today. Appreciate you joining. Appreciate you volunteering. And let's just shape this into the community that we want it to be in the future.